toxic masculinity.
Let's see here. Yeah, so this one's a little bit weird. It's okay. So this story is called "Biden Mask Fetish Drives Skepticism of Vaccines." Right now, so this is something that we've kind of speculated on, and Tucker Carlson touches on this a lot. This idea that Biden wearing the mask all the time is going to confuse people. Right? People think they need a mask after they've been vaccinated now because Biden keeps wearing a mask all the time. And according to this doctor, this is very likely, right? That people are no longer trusting the vaccine. So it's even worse than people thinking you need to wear a mask after the vaccine. It's like, if you got to wear a mask after the vaccine, does the vaccine even work, right? So this is driving skepticism, according to this guy. So former coronavirus testing czar, Dr. Brett Girwa, I don't know how to pronounce his name, joined America's Newsroom Friday to argue that President Biden's COVID-19 response is sending mixed messages to Americans on their effectiveness of the vaccine. Dr. Brett Girwa, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Well, I haven't actually played this, so I don't know how, I guess it's just 1 minute. Let's go ahead and play it.
Dr. Brett Giroir was the Trump administration coronavirus testing czar and a former assistant secretary of Health and Human Services. Yesterday, sir, there was this event down in Georgia that President Biden went to. And I said on the night of the speech, if you are indoors and you are with other vaccinated people, as I understand it, the guidelines say you don't have to wear a mask. Then yesterday, down in Georgia, if I think we could take a look at this, he can't find his mask after his speech, but he's outside. Does he really need it? And then they had this big car rally yesterday, too. Instead of people being able to be out and about, I mean, is this hurting our ability to get people to take the vaccine?
Well, thanks for having me on. And I do think there's so many mixed messages out there. And the data are really clear. If you're vaccinated and the people around you are vaccinated, your chances of dying of COVID are much less than dying of just a car crash going out in the street or normal daily activities. So if you're around vaccinated people, you should not wear a mask. You're very, very safe. If you're outdoors, you could always physically distance and be outdoors without a mask around other people. We know the transmission is very low. So I think this is very confusing, and it's causing people to not have faith in the vaccine. It's exactly the opposite of what we want.
Yeah, at some point you could almost say that they were anti-vax.
Well, there is no such thing as no risk. And I think the CDC is approaching this as we have to have zero risk. And we don't live our lives like that. If you're vaccinated and other people are vaccinated, the chances of getting COVID are 0.008%.
Right.
And the chances of dying is 0.00001%, much less than other activities. So you are.
I'm not actually even sure those numbers are right, and the reason I say that is because I think they're calculating these risks in terms of guessing, right? And the reason that they're doing that is because there are no actual cases around the entire world, of casual interactions outdoors infecting anyone. Right. So if you're walking down the street and you pass somebody who's got COVID and they cough, right, there is this assumption that, okay, yeah, you could probably catch COVID, right? I think there's a guess that you could do it. But there's no documented cases of that happening anywhere, ever. I know that sounds like exaggeration, but it isn't. I researched this. I did a video on it. I'm posting it soon on some of these statistics. And yeah, there's just no evidence of this at all. So getting COVID outdoors from, say, like going on a hike or something like that is essentially impossible. Right? It's something that we haven't been able to see as a phenomenon existing. So we're not even aware that it's even possible. And then this idea of getting sick after you've been vaccinated, that's where you have these percentages that come in that we do know that people have gotten sick after having been vaccinated. So, but it's incredibly small percentage of people. And so, but the idea of catching COVID outdoors around other people who've also been vaccinated and you've been vaccinated, I don't even understand how I don't even understand how he's putting a percentage on it. Shouldn't that be 0.00000. I mean, there's no chance, right? I mean, if you're a healthy person, and I'm just gonna say this is a fact. All right, this is a fact. If you're a healthy person and you don't have COVID, and you are spending time with a bunch of other people who don't have COVID, I know this might be controversial. YouTube might not like this, but you can't catch COVID. Okay, you can't catch an illness that you don't have access to, right? That you're not around. You don't encounter the illness. You won't catch the illness. It's not possible for a viral illness. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't matter if you have a mask or if people are vaccinated or if you're inside or outside. If you're around people who don't have COVID, you're not going to catch COVID. And I think the big problem that we have is that there's this idea, well, people might have COVID and they don't know it, or, there might be people around you that just think they have a cold but really they have COVID, something like that. And that's why you need to wear a mask, and that's why you need to get vaccinated, so you got to have all this protection. But from all the research that I've done, and looking at all the different countries and the measures that they've taken and how severe they have, the severity of the cases of COVID versus the countries that have had it bad versus the countries that have had it good, I can't seem to see any kind of pattern. It's freaking weird, you guys. Like, I've seen some countries who have enacted a lot of strict lockdowns, like the UK, for instance, and they haven't seemed to benefit at all from it, right? A lot of these, the measures, the strict measures that they're taking, I think that the UK, I believe, is the 6th most strict country in the world in terms of anti-COVID measures, right? Measures to combat COVID, and in January, they had the highest percentage of deaths in the world. In total, I think it's Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic. Czech Republic also enacted some of the most severe restrictions very early on, and they are the worst hit country on earth. And it's weird. It's like, and of course, there are some places that didn't put in any measures and they were hit pretty hard. But here's the thing. There were a lot of countries that, and some countries put restrictive measures in and then they fared very well. But it doesn't, like, sometimes you do find countries that really don't put in many restrictions and then they don't seem to have a COVID problem. And you have other countries that put in all these restrictions and they have a really severe COVID problem. So it looks like most of the techniques that have been used to combat COVID have been totally ineffective, right? And I think that is the biggest lesson we need to take from the pandemic, is that most of the thinking on this has been wrong. And I'm not really sure what measures need to be taken in order to combat a pandemic like this, something that is an airborne virus that you can get infected by, that's very dangerous. How do you combat such a thing when all of the methods that they believe work clearly don't? The only country that appears to have gotten it right is Taiwan. Taiwan. And Taiwan doesn't seem to have done that much, doesn't seem to have implemented too harsh of measures, and the measures they did implement weren't that different from what the other countries did. So I think that a lot of researchers are going to be studying what Taiwan did for many years to come and to try to identify what they did differently than the other countries. But they obviously did something right, but it's not clear what that thing is. Like, you'll read different articles that'll say different things, like, well, the reason that they did so well is because they did this, this, and this. Yeah, but this other country did the same things, and everybody's dead now. It's weird, man. You know how many people died in Taiwan? 12. I think their country is like 24 million people. 12 people died. Bizarre, guys. Bizarre. And they did not lock anybody down. They didn't lock down any businesses. They didn't lock anybody in their homes. They never quarantined. As far as I know, I think you had to quarantine if you traveled into the country from elsewhere, or if you tested positive. I think that was, or if you were in contact with somebody who tested positive. I think they did that. So there were measures, but like, there's the same measures that other countries took, and lots of other places got hit far worse. I don't know. It's a weird thing, man. COVID is so weird. People talk about it all intelligently, like they know what they're talking about on these shows, and they really don't. They really don't. But obviously, being vaccinated, around other people that are vaccinated, outside, I mean, wearing a mask is just insane. But there's this bizarre idea on the left about setting a good example. I just watched a documentary about recycling. And recycling is no longer a viable way to get rid of human waste, like human refuse, like our garbage. It's not. It doesn't really help anything anymore. It used to be something that we could that had some degree of benefit. It reduced human waste to some degree, but it's no longer a practical way to discard our rubbish. And, you might as well just throw your stuff away in the garbage can. I mean, really. I mean, you guys should look into it. It's pretty crazy. Like, recycling does nothing. It does nothing. Does not help the environment. Doesn't do anything. And so I'm watching this documentary, and people are all frustrated about this. And if you listen to the government guidance on recycling, they still have this guidance that's like, oh, yeah, recycling's really good. Everybody should recycle. And when you ask the experts about why this is, they'll say, well, the government seems to think for some reason. So, like, okay, we tend to put in all these environmental legislation, but America actually doesn't produce that much garbage. I mean, we do produce a lot of garbage, but we take care of it very well. There's this argument that we produce all this garbage that goes into the oceans, right? You've heard this many, many times, like the great, island of trash in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? I forget what they call it. But actually, we produce almost none of that. The 90% of the trash in the oceans that we're talking about, this terrible, terrible waste, this terrible, terrible littering, pollution all over the oceans, it almost all comes from Asia and Africa, right? These poorer countries, like especially China, that'll just dump trash into the ocean. We don't do that in America, right? We have landfills. We have fairly high-tech ways of disposing of garbage. But we still need to produce, put in all these very strict regulations. Like for a while in LA, we couldn't have straws. There's a lot of restaurants that still don't give you a plastic straw because there was a stupid freaking viral video about a turtle that got a straw up its nose. So now none of us are allowed to have straws. I mean, it's unbelievably stupid. These people are so stupid. But anyway, and then you have all these plastic bag bans. Oh, you're not allowed to have plastic bags. You're not allowed to have plastic bags. Because they end up in the ocean. But they don't actually. None of the trash in the ocean is grocery bags from America. But we still have to have these grocery bag bans. Why? Well, because Democrats feel good about passing stupid environmentalist legislation. But again, when you ask them, why do we have to do this? Despite the fact that America is not the country that's polluting all of this. It's all like China and Africa and these places. They will tell you, and I'm not kidding, well, we have to set a good example. Okay, we have to set a good example. That's great. That's wonderful. We're setting a good example. Here's the problem with that. Nobody cares. There is no country in the world that looks at America doing, sustainably doing whatever we're doing, all this environmental legislation, and going, oh, you know what? America's so amazing. We need to do what America's doing. No. These countries act in their best interests. If it's cheaper for them to pollute the world, they will pollute the world because they're irresponsible. If you want them to behave in a certain way, you've got to negotiate with them, with like trade deals, stuff like that. What Trump used to do. We used to say, oh, well, we don't like your humanitarian crap in China, so we're going to, we're maybe going to put sanctions on you, something like that. If you think that China's polluting too much and destroying the world, you deal with them. Multilaterally, you talk to all your other countries. You say, okay, we're all going to put sanctions on China. Everybody agree? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Whatever. You put pressure on the country to sort themselves out if they're destroying your country through pollution, something like that. There's different ways to deal with that. You don't go ahead and say, okay, China, you just do whatever you want, but look at us. We're being really clean. Look at us making our bed. You should make your bed too. You know what China's going to do? They're going to go, ha, okay, go for it. They don't care. They don't care. The good example argument is the dumbest thing I've ever heard come out of the left, and everything that comes out of the left is super dumb. But that's one of the stupidest things because nobody in fact, as much as we limit ourselves and we create new expenses for America that aren't necessary, the more other countries are thrilled by that because other countries will say, oh, great, you're imposing regulations on yourselves that we don't impose on ourselves. Therefore, we're at a competitive advantage. Go for it, America. Yeah. Paris Climate Accords. Go for it. Whatever it is that we do that makes it harder for us to compete internationally is good for other countries. So if we're doing something that, helps the environment supposedly, which probably doesn't, but it hurts us economically, other countries will be all on board. And if we pull out of that, other countries will say, oh, America doesn't care about the environment. Oh, we need to pressure them. We need to make them feel guilty about this because not because they care about the environment, but because they want that competitive advantage. Democrats are just so stupid. Okay. Last story. Let's get into it. This is sorry. Hold on. All right. Last story. This is a follow-up on exactly what happened with yesterday with Tim Scott. You guys remember Tim Scott? He was being called Uncle Tim, right, which is a play on the term Uncle Tom. Basically, everybody's saying that he's a traitor to black people. So this article I've entitled, MSNBC says Tim Scott doesn't know what racism is. Okay, so let's go ahead and watch this clip of the morons at MSNBC basically saying it's okay to call Tim Scott an Uncle Tim because he doesn't know what racism is. What a bunch of morons. Okay, let me turn the audio.
What do you think about the fact that that was trending last night? And do you find it as problematic as I did?
Yeah, I definitely find it problematic. But I mean, I think it's also one of those things where on social media, the internal conversations that many black people have about Tim Scott and the Republican Party have now made their way to the public discourse. I mean, let's be clear. Looking at Tim Scott's response, we know that he's carrying the water not just for the Republican Party and his two other black colleagues, but he did so under the Trump administration. So that's where the lack of respect comes from. When he talks about growing up in a one-bedroom house, ask yourself, why did you grow up in a one-bedroom house? Because your party doesn't believe in equality. Ask yourself why your grandfather didn't know how to read. It's because your party actually defunds education. Ask yourself why it is that you went to failing schools. It's because your party doesn't value education, especially for black youth, especially for people in the South. So the fact that Tim Scott tried to make an individual conversation when it should be a larger institutional problem that his party is part of, and one of the main reasons why we have such inequity, explains why this Uncle Tim hashtag was trending, and explains the frustration also that many Democratic Christians had, where he's trying to weaponize Christianity in a way that lots of Democratic Christians were like, what are you talking about? Like, we can actually believe in, Christ or whatever the indoctrination is without actually having policies that destroy not just our country, but so many people across the globe.
Did she just call Christianity indoctrination? Not only did she call Christianity indoctrination, but she actually used the word frustration. This word has always cracked me up. I don't understand why black people say this. Okay, so it's quite popular amongst toxic masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.